The rain hammered against the tall windows of the corporate building as Maya Chan walked through the marble lobby. Her black hair was still damp from the storm outside, and her simple uniform marked her as one of the many servants who kept the massive company running behind the scenes. She carried a silver tray with a single envelope, her hands steady despite the weight of what she knew was inside. Maya had worked at Harrison Industries for 3 years. She cleaned the executive floors, served coffee in important meetings, and made herself invisible while the powerful people made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Most days, she was just another face in the crowd of workers who kept the building functioning. But today was different. The elevator climbed to the 42nd floor, where David Harrison, the company's young CEO, spent most of his time. At 28, he had inherited the business empire from his father just 2 years ago. Since then, Maya had watched him change from a hopeful leader into someone who drowned his stress in expensive whiskey and late-night meetings that went nowhere. She knocked softly on his office door. The richwood gleamed under the soft lighting, and, through the glass panels, she could see him sitting at his massive desk. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, and there was a crystal glass in his hand that definitely wasn't holding water. "Come in," his voice was tired, slightly slurred. Maya entered quietly, her soft shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. The office smelled like leather, expensive cologne, and alcohol. David looked up at her with bloodshot eyes, his usually perfect hair falling across his forehead. He was handsome in the way that money and good genes made possible, but today he looked exhausted and lost. "What is it, Maya?" he asked, recognizing her face but clearly struggling to focus. She placed the tray on his desk and picked up the envelope. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it out to him. "This came for you, Mr. Harrison. It's marked urgent." David took another sip from his glass before reaching for the envelope. As he opened it, Maya noticed how his hands shook. The stress of running the company was destroying him, and everyone could see it except him. The letter was brief, written on expensive paper in elegant handwriting. His face went white as he read. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the desk. Maya could see enough to know it was about the company's financial problems, the ones that the board members whispered about in the hallways. The debts that were piling up while David tried to drink away his father's legacy. "Mr. Harrison," Maya said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to stay sober. You need to leave at once." The words hung in the air between them. David looked at her with surprise, as if he had forgotten she was there. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, he set down his glass and really looked at her for the first time in months. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice sharper now. Maya took a breath, knowing she was crossing a line that servants weren't supposed to cross. "The message, sir. It's about the emergency board meeting. They're planning to remove you tonight. If you don't leave now, if you're not sober, they'll use it against you." David stood up quickly, his chair rolling backward. "How do you know about that?" "I cleaned the conference rooms, Mr. Harrison." "I hear things. The board members think you can't handle the pressure. They think you're just like your father was before." She stopped herself before mentioning the older Harrison's drinking problem that had nearly destroyed the company years earlier. David walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that sparkled below. "My father built this company from nothing," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "When he died, he left me everything. The buildings, the employees, the responsibility for thousands of families who depend on Harrison Industries for their jobs." "I know, sir," Maya said gently. "Do you?" He turned to face her, and she could see the pain in his eyes. "Do you know what it's like to have everyone watching you, waiting for you to fail? Do you know what it's like to make decisions that could destroy people's lives if you get them wrong?" Maya looked down at her hands. "I know what it's like to worry about having enough money to pay rent. I know what it's like to work 3 jobs just to help my mother with her medical bills. I know what it's like to feel invisible while other people make decisions about your future." David was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know about your mother." "There's a lot you don't know about the people who work for you," Maya said, surprised by her own boldness. "But that's not important right now. What's important is that letter. The board meeting starts in 2 hours. If you go there like this, they'll vote you out tonight. He picked up the letter again, reading it more carefully this time. Maya watched his face change as the reality of the situation sank in. His father's old business partner, Richard Blackwell, had been gathering support from the other board members. They had lost confidence in David's leadership, especially after the company's stock price had dropped 15% in the last quarter. They want Blackwell to take over, David said, mostly to himself. He's been planning this for months, Maya confirmed. I've cleaned his office. I've seen the documents. David looked at her with new interest. You've been watching this whole situation? Maya nodded. I watch everything, Mr. Harrison. When you're invisible, you see things that other people miss. I've seen Mr. Blackwell meeting with board members in restaurants across town. I've seen him reviewing financial reports that paint you in a bad light. I've seen him practicing speeches about new leadership. Why are you telling me this? David asked, moving closer to her. You could have just delivered the letter and left. Because this company employs 800 people, Maya said, meeting his eyes for the first time. Because Mr. Blackwell's plans include layoffs and factory closures. Because my friends work here, and they have families to feed. David was standing close enough now that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, but also something else, the expensive soap he used, the fabric softener in his shirt. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't just bloodshot from drinking. He had been crying. You're afraid, she said softly. Terrified, he admitted. Every decision I make affects hundreds of people. Every contract I sign, every deal I approve or reject. My father made it look so easy, but he had 20 years of experience when I was born. I've had 2 years, and I'm drowning. Maya felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the confident CEO that everyone saw in the newspapers. This was a young man who had been given more responsibility than anyone should have to carry alone. Mr. Harrison, she said gently, you're not your father. You don't have to carry this burden exactly the way he did. The board doesn't think I can handle it at all, he said bitterly. Then, prove them wrong, Maya said, her voice stronger now. But, not like this. Not with alcohol clouding your judgment. Not when you're too tired to think straight. David looked at the glass on his desk, then, back at her. What do you suggest? Take a shower. Drink some coffee. Call your lawyer. And, most importantly, get out of this building before the board meeting starts. Go home, clear your head, and figure out your next move when you're thinking clearly. Run away, he asked. Strategic retreat, Maya corrected. Give yourself time to prepare instead of walking into an ambush. David was quiet for a long time, processing everything she had told him. Finally, he reached out and took her hand. Maya was startled by the contact, his skin was warm, and his grip was firm despite the alcohol. Why do you care what happens to me? He asked, his voice soft. Maya felt her heart speed up. His hand was larger than hers, and she could feel the calluses on his fingers from his college days when he had worked in the company's warehouses during summers. She had heard the stories from older employees about how his father had insisted he learn the business from the bottom up. Because, she said, searching for the right words, I've watched you for 3 years. I've seen you working late into the night, trying to solve problems that your father's old advisors created. I've seen you in the hallway after difficult meetings, and I know you're trying to do right by everyone. You're not the selfish rich boy that some people think you are. David's grip on her hand tightened slightly. You've been watching me? Maya felt herself blushing. It's my job to be invisible, Mr. Harrison. But that doesn't mean I don't see things. What kinds of things? He asked, stepping even closer. I see you staying late to personally review the employee health insurance policies. I see you eating lunch alone while reading reports about worker safety improvements. I see you arguing with the board members about maintaining the pension fund instead of cutting it to increase profits. David looked surprised. You pay attention to all of that? I pay attention to people who care about other people, Maya said simply. And, despite what the board members think, you care. Maybe too much. Maybe that's why you've been drinking. David let go of her hand and ran his fingers through his hair. I feel like I'm failing everyone. The employees, the shareholders, my father's memory. Every day brings new problems, and I don't know if I'm making the right decisions. Nobody knows if they're making the right decisions, Maya said. But, you're making them for the right reasons. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen the alternative, Maya said, thinking about her previous jobs at companies where the bosses only cared about profit. I've worked for people who see employees as numbers on a spreadsheet. You're not like that. David picked up the letter again, reading the harsh words about his incompetence and inability to provide stable leadership. Maya watched his jaw tighten as he processed the betrayal from people he had trusted. They're probably right, he said finally. Maybe I am in over my head. Maybe you are, Maya agreed, surprising him. But, being in over your head isn't the same as being unable to learn how to swim. David smiled for the first time since she had entered the office. That's an interesting way to put it. My grandmother used to say that, Maya said. She raised 4 children while working 2 jobs and going to night school. She was in over her head for about 15 years, but she figured it out. Smart woman, David said. She was. And she would have told you the same thing I'm telling you now. You can't solve problems when you're not thinking clearly. And you can't lead people when you're drowning in self-doubt and alcohol. David looked at his glass one more time, then walked over and poured the contents down the sink in the small wet bar in his office. You're right, he said. About all of it. He turned back to face her, and Maya saw something different in his expression. The desperation was still there, but underneath it was a determination that reminded her why she had believed in him in the first place. Maya, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, Mr. Harrison. Do you think I can really do this? Not what you think I want to hear, but what you actually believe. Can I save this company? Maya looked at him carefully, thinking about everything she had observed over the past 3 years. She thought about the late nights he spent reviewing safety reports, the way he remembered the names of employees in the factory, the time she had seen him quietly arranging for extra health benefits for a worker whose child had cancer. I think, she said slowly, that you have something your father didn't have at your age. What's that? You care more about the people than the profit. Your father was brilliant, but he learned to care about his employees over time. You started with that care. If you can learn the business skills to match your heart, this company will be stronger than it ever was under your father. David stared at her for a long moment. That might be the first completely honest thing anyone has said to me since my father died. Then, you haven't been asking the right people the right questions, Maya said. David laughed, and the sound was so genuine that Maya realized she had never heard him really laugh before. You might be right about that too. He walked back to his desk and pressed the intercom button. Jennifer, cancel all my appointments for tonight. And have my driver bring the car around to the back entrance. Yes, sir, came the response from his secretary. David looked at Maya. You've given me good advice tonight. Better advice than I've gotten from anyone in months. Is there anything I can do for you in return? Maya shook her head. Just save the company, Mr. Harrison. That's all any of us want. David, he said. I'm sorry? Call me David. I think we're past the formal stage of our relationship. Maya felt something flutter in her stomach at the word relationship. I should go, Mr. Harrison. David. You need to get ready. Maya, wait. David moved around the desk until he was standing in front of her again. This conversation we've had tonight, it can't be the last one. I don't understand. I need advisors I can trust. People who will tell me the truth instead of what they think I want to hear. Would you think about working more directly with me? Maya blinked in surprise. I'm a servant, Mr. Harrison. David. I clean offices and serve coffee. you're observant, honest, and you care about this company and its people. Those are exactly the qualifications I need right now." He paused. "Think about it. We can discuss it more when this crisis is over." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The idea of working closely with David Harrison, of being part of the decisions instead of just watching them happen, was both thrilling and terrifying. "Go home," David said gently. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day." Maya gathered up the empty tray and headed toward the door. As she reached for the handle, David called her name one more time. "Maya?" She turned back to face him. "Thank you. For caring enough to tell me the truth. For seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself tonight." Maya smiled. "See you tomorrow, David." As the elevator descended toward the lobby, Maya realized that everything had changed in the space of one conversation. She had spent 3 years watching David Harrison from a distance, and tonight she had finally seen the real person behind the corporate image. The scared, determined, caring person who was trying so hard to live up to an impossible legacy. The storm was still raging outside when Maya left the building, but somehow the rain felt less cold against her face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new crises, new decisions that could change the future of Harrison Industries. But tonight, for the first time in months, Maya felt hopeful. Behind her, 42 floors up, David Harrison was taking the first sober breath he had taken in weeks, preparing to fight for his company and the people who depended on him. And, for the first time since his father's death, he didn't feel like he was fighting alone. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small apartment, listening to the rain against her window and thinking about the conversation with David Harrison. Her mother was asleep in the next room, breathing heavily from the medication that helped with her lung condition. The medical bills sat on Maya's kitchen table, reminders of why she couldn't afford to lose her job at Harrison Industries. At 5 a.m, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Emergency board meeting moved to 7 a.m. They're making their move early." Maya's heart raced. David was reaching out to her, trusting her with information that could affect the entire company. She quickly dressed in her uniform and took the early bus to the corporate building, arriving just as the sun was beginning to rise through the storm clouds. The building felt different in the early morning. Security guards nodded at her as she badged in, but there was tension in the air. Maya took the service elevator to the 42nd floor, where she could see lights already on in several offices. The board members were arriving early, preparing for their coup. David's office was empty, but she could see from the coffee maker that he had been there recently. Maya began her usual cleaning routine, but her attention was focused on the sounds coming from the conference room down the hall. She could hear Richard Blackwell's voice, confident and commanding, as he spoke with the other board members. "Gentlemen, we all know why we're here," Blackwell was saying. "David Harrison is a liability to this company. His drinking, his poor judgment, his inability to handle the pressure of leadership. We have a responsibility to the shareholders to act." Maya moved closer to the conference room, pretending to dust the artwork in the hallway. Through the partly open door, she could see 7 of the 9 board members seated around the long table. Blackwell stood at the head, a presentation projected on the wall behind him showing declining stock prices and missed quarterly targets. "The boy means well," said Margaret Chen, an older woman who had worked with David's father for decades. "But meaning well isn't enough to run a company of this size. His father was twice his age when he took over," added James Morrison, another longtime board member. "David simply doesn't have the experience or the temperament." Maya felt anger rising in her chest. These people had known David since he was a child. They had watched him grow up, had seen him work in the company warehouses during his college summers, had witnessed his dedication to learning every aspect of the business. Now they were ready to throw him away at the first sign of struggle. "Where is young Harrison this morning?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the newest board member. "Shouldn't he be here to defend himself?" "I'm sure he's sleeping off another night of drinking," Blackwell said with a cruel smile. "This is exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior that proves our point." Maya couldn't stand to hear any more. She quietly moved away from the conference room and headed to David's office, where she found him sitting in the dark, staring out at the city as the morning light grew stronger. "They're all there," Maya said softly, closing the door behind her. "I know," David replied without turning around. "I've been watching them arrive for the past hour." "You're not going in?" David turned to face her, and Maya was relieved to see that his eyes were clear. He had showered and put on a fresh suit, and there was no smell of alcohol about him. "I'm not walking into that ambush unprepared," he said. "You were right last night. I need time to think, to plan." "What are you going to do?" "I spent the night going through the company's financial records," David said, gesturing to the laptop on his desk and the papers scattered around it. "Really going through them, not just skimming the summaries that Blackwell and the other advisors give me." "What did you find?" David's expression was grim. "I found out why they're in such a hurry to remove me." Maya sat down in one of the chairs across from his desk. "Tell me." 3 months ago, Blackwell convinced me to approve a merger deal with Stratton Corp., David began. "He said it would strengthen our position in the overseas markets, bring in new revenue streams. The numbers looked good on paper, so I signed off on it. But the numbers were manipulated. Stratton Corp is essentially worthless. Their overseas contracts are fake, their revenue projections are fantasy. Blackwell knew this when he brought me the deal." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "He's trying to destroy the company?" "He's trying to drive down our stock price," David explained. "His investment firm has been buying Harrison Industries stock through shell companies for months. If he can remove me and take over as CEO, he can announce the discovery of the fake merger, blame everything on my poor leadership, and then save the company by restructuring. Which would make him look like a hero," Maya realized. "And make him incredibly rich when the stock price recovers," David finished. "He's been planning this for over a year, probably since before my father died." Maya stared at him in shock. "You have proof of all this?" David nodded toward his laptop. "Bank records, email communications, shell company filings. I've been up all night piecing it together with my lawyer." "Then, you can stop the board meeting. You can expose what he's doing." David shook his head. "It's not that simple." "Yes, I have proof that Blackwell manipulated the merger deal. But the fact remains that I approved it. I signed the documents. Legally, the responsibility is still mine." Maya felt her hope deflating. "So he wins either way?" "Not necessarily," David said, standing up and walking to the window. "I have one advantage that Blackwell doesn't know about." "What's that?" "You." Maya blinked in confusion. "Me?" David turned to face her. "You know this building better than anyone. You've been watching and listening for 3 years. You know where people have conversations they think are private, where documents get left behind, where secrets are hidden." "I don't understand what you're asking me to do." "I'm asking you to help me gather evidence," David said. "Not just about the merger deal, but about everything. Blackwell's meetings with board members, his promises to them, his plans for the company after he takes over." Maya felt her heart racing. "You want me to spy on them?" "I want you to do what you've already been doing," David said gently. "Watching and listening. But this time, we document everything." Maya thought about her mother's medical bills, about the 800 employees who would lose their jobs if Blackwell succeeded, about the man standing in front of her who was fighting for something bigger than himself. "What do you need me to do?" David smiled, and Maya realized it was the first genuine smile she had seen from him in months. "First, I need you to get into Blackwell's office. He's in the conference room, so his door should be unlocked. Look for any documents related to his stock purchases or his communications with the other board members." "And if I get caught?" "You won't," David said with confidence. "You're invisible, remember? That's your superpower." Maya stood up, smoothing her uniform. "Anything else?" "Yes. I need you to listen to the rest of the board meeting. Find out exactly what Blackwell is promising the other members, what his timeline is, how he plans to handle the transition. And then? Then, we fight back. Maya headed toward the door, then stopped. David? Yes? Last night, you asked if I thought you could really do this. Save the company, I mean. I remember. I told you that you cared more about the people than the profit. But, there's something else you have that your father didn't have when he was your age. What's that? You're not afraid to ask for help from people who know things you don't know. Your father was brilliant, but he was also proud. You're smart enough to listen to the people around you, even when they're wearing servant uniforms. David looked at her for a long moment. You're not wearing a servant uniform, Maya. What do you mean? You're wearing the uniform of someone I trust completely. Someone who's become essential to saving this company. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. I'll get the information you need. Be careful, David said. Blackwell is desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. Maya slipped out of David's office and made her way down the hall toward Richard Blackwell's corner office. The door was unlocked, as David had predicted. Maya entered quietly, her heart pounding as she looked around the luxurious space. Blackwell's desk was organized with military precision. Maya began carefully looking through the papers, photographing documents with her phone. She found copies of stock purchase agreements, emails from board members expressing support for new leadership, and, most damaging of all, a detailed timeline for taking over the company. According to Blackwell's notes, he planned to have David voted out this morning, take over as interim CEO by afternoon, and announce the discovery of the merger fraud by the end of the week. It was exactly as David had suspected. Maya was about to leave when she heard footsteps in the hallway. She quickly moved away from the desk and grabbed a cloth from her cleaning supplies, pretending to dust the bookshelf as Richard Blackwell entered his office. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Cleaning, sir," Maya said quietly, not looking up from the book she was dusting. "I'm sorry if I disturbed anything." Blackwell studied her for a moment, his eyes cold and calculating. "You're the one who works on Harrison's floor, aren't you?" "Yes, sir. I clean all the executive offices." "Have you seen David this morning?" Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "No, sir. His office was empty when I went to clean it." Blackwell smiled coldly. "Still sleeping off his drinking, no doubt. Well, he'll be out of a job by noon anyway." Maya continued dusting, fighting the urge to defend David. "Will there be anything else, sir?" "Actually, yes," Blackwell said, moving closer to her. "I'm going to be the new CEO of this company very soon. I'll remember the employees who were helpful during this transition." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Maya finally looked up at him, meeting his cold gaze. "I just clean offices, sir. I don't get involved in business matters." "Smart girl," Blackwell said. "Keep it that way." Maya finished her fake cleaning and left the office, her hands shaking slightly as she walked back toward the elevators. She had gotten the information David needed, but Blackwell's threatening tone had rattled her. This man was willing to destroy hundreds of people's lives for his own profit, and he wouldn't hesitate to crush anyone who got in his way. She found David in the small conference room next to his office, reviewing the documents she had photographed. His lawyer, a serious woman named Patricia Williams, was sitting beside him, taking notes on her tablet. "This is exactly what we needed," Patricia was saying as Maya entered. "Combined with the financial records David uncovered, we have a clear case for fraud and manipulation." "Will it be enough to stop the board meeting?" Maya asked. Patricia shook her head. "Not immediately. The board has the legal right to remove David as CEO if they believe it's in the best interest of the company. But this evidence will help us challenge their decision and expose Blackwell's motives." David looked up at Maya. "How did it go? Any problems?" "Blackwell came back to his office while I was there," Maya said. "He was suspicious, but I think he bought the cleaning story." What did he say? Maya hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. He said you'd be out of a job by noon. And he made it clear that he expects employee loyalty during the transition. David's jaw tightened. He threatened you? Not directly. But the message was clear. Patricia looked between David and Maya with interest. You know, there might be another way to handle this situation. What do you mean? David asked. Instead of trying to stop the board meeting, we let it happen. We let Blackwell make his move, get everything on record. Then, we present our evidence publicly, showing that the board was manipulated into making their decision based on false information. That's a big risk, David said. Once they vote me out, it might be hard to get back in. But, if we can prove that Blackwell orchestrated this whole situation through fraud, the board will have no choice but to reverse their decision, Patricia explained. And Blackwell will face criminal charges. Maya listened to the discussion, thinking about the employees who were already arriving for their shifts, unaware that their jobs were hanging in the balance. What about the company? What happens to everyone while all this legal stuff is happening? Patricia smiled at her. That's an excellent question. David, you might want to consider appointing an interim successor before the board meeting. Someone you trust to protect the company's interests. Who would you suggest? David asked. Patricia looked meaningfully at Maya. Someone who understands the company from the ground up. Someone who cares about the employees and knows how the business really operates day to day. David followed her gaze to Maya, who realized what they were suggesting. You can't be serious, Maya said, stepping backward. I'm not qualified to run a company. You're more qualified than you think, David said gently. You know this business better than most executives I've met. You understand what the employees need, what the company's problems really are. But, I don't have a business degree, I don't know about financial statements and board meetings and... Neither did my father when he started, David interrupted. He learned as he went, and he had good people to help him. I'm not talking about making you CEO forever, Maya. Just someone to hold things together while we sort out this mess with Blackwell. Maya felt overwhelmed by the possibility. Part of her was terrified by the responsibility, but another part was excited by the chance to actually help make the decisions instead of just watching them happen. Think about it, David said. You've been preparing for this your whole life, even if you didn't know it. All those years of watching, listening, learning how this company really works. All that time caring about the people who depend on Harrison Industries for their livelihoods. Maya looked out the window at the city below, thinking about her mother in their small apartment, about her friends in the building who trusted her, about the future that seemed both terrifying and full of possibility. If I say yes, she said slowly, what exactly would I be agreeing to do? Lead with your heart, David said simply. Make decisions based on what's right for the people who depend on this company. Everything else, we can teach you. Maya took a deep breath, thinking about the scared young man who had grabbed her hand the night before, who had trusted her with his fears and his hopes for the company his father had built. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. David smiled, and Maya realized that despite everything happening around them, she had never felt more ready to step out of the shadows and into the light. The boardroom felt like a battlefield when Maya entered an hour later. She wasn't there as a servant this time. David's lawyer had quickly prepared the paperwork making her interim chief operating officer, a position that gave her the right to attend board meetings and speak for the company's operational interests. She wore the same simple black dress she always wore, but now she carried herself differently. Patricia Williams had given her a crash course in boardroom protocol, but Maya's real preparation had been 3 years of watching these same people make decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Richard Blackwell was already holding court at the head of the table when Maya and David entered together. The surprise on the board members' faces was obvious. They had expected David to either not show up or arrive drunk and unprepared. Gentlemen, Margaret, David said, nodding to each board member as he took his seat. I believe you all know Maya Chen, our new chief operating officer. Margaret Chen looked up sharply at hearing her own last name. Chen? Are you related to me, dear? No relation, Maya said politely, taking the seat beside David. It's a common name. Blackwell's face was flushed with anger. David, what is the meaning of this? This woman is a cleaning lady. You can't just promote servants to executive positions without board approval. Actually, I can, David replied calmly. As CEO, I have the authority to make operational appointments. And, Miss Chen has more real knowledge about this company's day-to-day operations than anyone else in this room. Dr. Kim leaned forward. With respect, David, this seems like a desperate move. What qualifications does she have for such a position? Maya took a breath, remembering what David and Patricia had told her about projecting confidence. I have 3 years of direct observation of every department in this company. I know which systems work and which don't. I know which employees are productive and which are just marking time. I know where money is being wasted and where investments are needed. Observation from emptying trash cans, Blackwell said dismissively. Observation from being invisible while you all made decisions, Maya replied, her voice steady. I've been in every meeting room when you thought no one was listening. I've seen every document that gets left on desks or thrown in trash bins. I probably know more about what actually happens in this company than any of you. James Morrison looked uncomfortable. That sounds like spying. That sounds like paying attention, Maya corrected. Which is more than I can say for most of the people making decisions around here. The room fell silent. Maya could feel her heart racing, but she kept her expression calm. These people were used to being the most powerful people in any room. They weren't used to being challenged by someone they considered beneath their notice. Well, Margaret Chen said with a slight smile, she certainly has backbone. Blackwell slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. We're not here to discuss David's latest desperate appointment. We're here because Harrison Industries is in.